Today's episode is brought to you by MD Hair. Inside prison walls, a person can go crazy. Year after year, locked inside a cage, but then again, you could say their crazy acts are what got them there in the first place. But what if something beyond themselves is gripping them slowly and taking over? Something evil, perhaps. Whether it happened before they got to jail or while behind bars, these stories today are terrifying. There are 5 incarcerated people possessed by demons. Number 5, Michael Taylor. In the small town of Ossett, England, an incident unfolded in 1974 that was utterly chaotic and unexpected. At the center of it all, 30-year-old Michael Taylor. Michael was a rather unremarkable man, someone who lived a quiet, unassuming life as a butcher with his wife Christine. The two attended church regularly, but something inside Taylor was brewing. A dark desire and a lust he was finding hard to control. Christine, noticing changes in her husband's behavior, sought help from the one place she knew she could find it, with the other members of her church in the Garber Christian Fellowship Group. She shared with them that her husband had a carnal desire to be with the lay leader of the group, Marie Robinson, and she feared that he may act on it. Well, this was big news in the small church gathering of this small town, and so people began to talk. As the controversy grew, so did the darkness within Michael, and so he felt he needed to confront Robinson about why she was teasing him with these unwanted desires. He unleashed a torrent of venomous words towards her. She came right back, claiming that it was all in his mind. Afterwards, he settled down, and seeking forgiveness for his actions, the man asked for absolution from the congregation. His plea was heard and granted. However, his behavior only grew more erratic from there. He then became more hostile not only towards his wife, but also to those around him. In an effort to save Michael's troubled soul, the church's local vicar sought the help of ministers who were well versed in exorcisms. It was in St. Thomas Church in Garber the exorcism happened. An Anglican priest and a Methodist clergyman joined forces with the congregation to help cast out the sinister forces that had supposedly taken hold of Taylor's being. The exorcism occurred over the course of 2 harrowing nights in October of 1974. According to their reports, there were 40 malevolent spirits, each embodying unspeakable vileness, that were cast out from the possessed man. He seemed better, but no one was sure if he was completely cured. As witnesses said, there was still a feeling of unease, a suspicion that the battle against evil may be far from over. Nonetheless, the church released him and declared him cleansed. And Taylor and his wife subsequently returned to their home, and that's when the real beast came out. I want to thank MD Hair for sponsoring today's video. As a user of their products myself, I'm very happy they reached out. And if you guys are dealing with any hair loss issues or even just want thicker, healthier hair, you got to check them out. I personally got tired of not taking care of my hair properly and was noticing some thinness going on, so I got proactive and found MD Hair, which has made a huge difference in the volume and thickness of my flow. They use AI technology to customize a hair treatment plan for you and a quick quiz, which is ideal because it takes all the guesswork out, and instantly they get you the right products needed to help your situation using natural ingredients that are backed by science. Their customized shampoo and conditioners are my favorite products and all I ever use. There's a night and day difference between these and regular shampoos, so if you're looking to up your grooming game, then you gotta check them out. Give them a try today. Customize your hair growth treatment with MD Hair. Use my promo code SCARY70 to get your first month of customized products at 70% off. Still consumed by the darkness, Michael, without warning, attacked Christine with his bare hands. The woman tried to fight back but was easily overpowered. In the ensuing violent fit of rage, Taylor tore at his wife's eyes and pulled her tongue out. The police report indicated that the woman was found with her face almost torn off from her skull. The couple's pet poodle wasn't even spared. He went on to strangle the poor animal as well. Taylor was then found wandering the street by a policeman on patrol, covered with blood and without clothing. He was arrested, and an eventual trial took place. Surprisingly, the court acquitted him of the murder charge on the grounds of mental instability. He was instead sent to a psychiatric hospital where he spent 2 years in treatment and was released afterwards. The bizarre nature of Michael Taylor's case continues to attract the public's attention to this day, some questioning if it was really the demons that forced him to commit such acts, or was it actually his innate violent nature? Either way, should this man really be let out to roam free? Number 4. Trial of Arnie Johnson. This is the story of the first time in American history that a defense lawyer had attempted to use demonic possession as the reason for their client committing their crimes. It's now well known as the "Devil Made Me Do It" case, and has since gone on to spawn several books, documentaries, and films. So, let's dig into how this came to be. It all began in the summer of 1980 in Brookfield, Connecticut, when 11-year-old David Glatzel was at the new rental house of 19-year-old Arnie Johnson, whose fiancée was David's older sister Debbie. They were there cleaning up the unit in preparation of moving in. That's when David says an old, burnt, and black-looking man pushed him onto a bed, telling him that if they moved in, he would bring harm to the family. At first they thought maybe David was making up a story so that his sister wouldn't move away, but back at home, David's visions of the man continued, and there was more than just his stories to confirm that what he was saying may actually be true. David kept seeing visions of the old man, who he described as having big black eyes, a thin face with animal features and jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hoofs. This kid was terrified from these night terrors, and he had scratches and bruises showing up, so everyone was getting worried. Arnie would come over to the house to help, and having the young man around could calm the boy down, but as they tried to get him to relax while also going about their day-to-day responsibilities, the young boy's visions worsened over the next week. The family themselves were hearing strange noises in the attic as well, and eventually, Glatzels made a call to famed demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren to come and perform an exorcism on David, as it was becoming apparent something was seriously wrong, that maybe this old man's spirit had attached itself to him and wasn't bluffing about hurting the family. Arnie was there throughout the exorcism, and at one point during one of the sessions, he actually taunted this demon, telling it, "Take me on. Leave my little buddy alone." Terrifyingly, all those who were present claimed to have actually witnessed the demonic transference. Young David seemed to have been released by the grips of the spirit, but Johnson now was tied to the forces of darkness. While out driving shortly after, Arnie lost control of his vehicle and crashed right into a tree. He was unharmed, fortunately, but he claimed that it was the demon that took the wheel and pulled him right off the road. Meanwhile, David's condition didn't actually improve much. He was still seeing visions. Debbie and Arnie needed to get out of the family's house, but didn't want to rent the original property they had chosen, since all this chaos started there. So they found an apartment they could rent. It was owned by Alan Bono, who Debbie worked for at a dog kennel as a groomer. It was during this time when she began to notice her boyfriend acting strange, similar to that of her younger brother. He would growl and hallucinate, but when asked later on, he said he had no memory of his actions. And then on February 16th of 1981, the unexpected happened. On that day, Bono took the Glatzel siblings, Debbie's 9-year-old cousin Mary, along with Arnie for lunch at a local restaurant. The landlord had a couple too many drinks there. When they all returned to the kennel after, an argument broke out and Debbie tried to take her cousin away, but Bono reportedly grabbed the little girl and wouldn't let her go. This infuriated Johnson, who was then heard making that same eerie growling sound he had been making. Things escalated to the point, and Johnson drew a 5-inch pocket knife, and he stabbed Bono repeatedly in the chest and stomach. The man would go on to die several hours later. The trial that eventually followed captivated the world's attention, as the defendant's lawyer boldly claimed that the accused was possessed by demons at the time of the killing. The judge, however, cited the lack of empirical evidence and deemed the defense impossible to prove in the court of law. As a result, Johnson was found guilty of first-degree manslaughter and then sentenced to 20 years in prison. He got out early due to good behavior. While in prison, the convicted killer received an education and got married to Debbie. Life for him and David eventually went back to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after this. So it appears, if in fact there were a demon involved, since they decided not to move in, the old man eventually left them alone. Number 3. Adrian Dao. People kill others for various reasons. For Adrian Dao, his reason was simple: to gain street cred. Dao was only 22 when he was incarcerated in an Ottawa jail in 2013 for a separate minor offense. But that year, he willingly confessed to Detective John Manette a shocking crime that supposedly took place a couple years prior. The confession was elicited while the inmate was clearly exhibiting symptoms of schizophrenia and seeking ways to escape solitary confinement. At the time, he had been kept in isolation for 22 days, which led him to engage in self-harm. That situation prompted correctional officers to make him wear a straitjacket. He was paranoid and delusional, and Dao believed that he was possessed by demons, that he needed to cut off his fingers to rid himself of evil. And because of this, he was fork-fed through the hatch in the door just to prevent him from biting off his own fingers. It was while in this dire condition that he confessed to the detective that he was the one responsible for the murder of Jennifer Stewart. The 36-year-old sex worker had been found dead in a parking lot in Vanier, Ontario, having been struck multiple times by an axe back in 2010. Police recorded his first confession, where he expressed his desire to claim the reward for the unsolved killing. He even requested a transfer to a federal prison, where he planned to establish his rap career. He was clearly not in a good state of mind, and his confession was riddled with inconsistencies. He first claimed that he used a knife to slay Stewart, when in fact, as mentioned, it was an axe. The man went on to reveal that he repeatedly hacked the victim in the torso area, but the autopsy results showed that there were no injuries there. At this point, Manette felt that Dao really had no understanding of the case he supposedly created, that he had got his information all from the news, and that it wasn't necessarily firsthand. As for his motive behind the confession in the first place, he said he wanted to gain respect in the hip-hop community, and as a result become a successful rapper with Stewart's murder under his belt. Regardless of these inconsistencies in his story, he was brought to trial for the crime. He told the jury he should not be held accountable for it because the CIA ordered him to do it. He pled not guilty, but regardless, after a psychiatrist explained the man's condition, the court convicted him for the murder of Stewart. Dao is undergoing treatment for the mental health issues, but he was sentenced to 25 years behind bars with no chance of parole for a crime he quite possibly may have never committed. Which means the killer is still out there. Number 2. John Shipley. It was in July 2022 when John Shipley of Edmonds, Washington called 911, frantically confessing to authorities the murder of his 66-year-old wife, Susan. During the call, the 73-year-old also claimed that he was possessed by demons, that he was subhuman, that he had been under their influence for most of his life, and it now just came to a head. When authorities arrived at their home, they were met with a chaotic scene in the living room. Susan laying lifeless, and 2 knives on the floor, and her husband sitting right there beside her. But it wasn't immediately clear if she had actually been stabbed to death. Upon a closer look, the investigators determined the cause of death as asphyxiation due to strangulation. And John explained that it was the satanic demons that instructed him to commit the crime. Mr. Shipley was immediately brought to the hospital for a mental evaluation, where the findings revealed some disturbing details. In a statement, John said his life had been plagued by demonic influence. It was in April of that same year that he became fully aware of the extent of his possession. When asked about his decision to call police, he said that he'd wanted the authorities to destroy him because what he had done was utterly brutal. So from a human standpoint, he knew what he had done was wrong, but the demons took control and he just had to do it. And this wasn't the first time that the law had a run-in with the suspect. Just months earlier, officers found the elderly man standing naked in the street. He was, as described, in a catatonic state and unresponsive during that incident. Medical records meanwhile revealed that Shipley had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Now detained, the septuagenarian faces a second-degree murder charge for the killing of his spouse. So, it appears it wasn't demons at all, but a mentally unwell man who will now spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 1. Clarita Villanueva. In 1953, a young woman named Clarita Villanueva, an orphan from Bacolod, Philippines, found herself locked up in the infamous Bilibid prison in Manila for vagrancy. Unknowingly, her time in that place would become a battleground between the forces of good and evil, as she became the center of the country's first case of demonic possession. Clarita grew up in a household filled with witchcraft and fortune-telling by her mother. When the matriarch passed away, the young girl decided to venture out to the country's capital city, Manila, to look for her father. To sustain her stay, she worked various menial jobs, including housekeeping. As time went on, she had herself become involved in prostitution, which got her in trouble with the law. And these choices she made are what eventually led her to the old Bilibid prison, where her encounter with the forces of evil took place. On May 9th of 1953, Clarita and her fellow inmates experienced a disturbance when tiny pebbles were being thrown inside their cell, coming from out of nowhere. Then on that same night, while Clarita was trying to sleep, she saw what she called the Thing, perched on a beam above her. The apparition then jumped onto her, causing her immense pain. She described this entity to be a 10-foot-tall dark man with curly hair and an angelic face. Her screaming consequently roused the attention of the whole prison. And curious, the next day the mayor at the time summoned the prisoner to her office, where she exhibited some disturbing behavior. Suddenly she began to screech in terror, saying the invisible creatures were biting her body. This prompted the guards to restrain her, and still she insisted that someone was gnawing at her fingers. Doctors and the prison chaplain were called, but they themselves could not explain the situation. Was she just acting? Perhaps, but it all seemed very real to those who were present. And even if it wasn't real, the woman made a convincing case that she believed it was happening. The extent of her demonic possession came to a point that she began to cast death wishes and misfortune to those who dared to speak against her. For instance, a physician came to visit and interviewed her. For no apparent reason, she gazed at the man and foretold of his death. And sure enough, the next day, the doctor suffered a heart attack at the same hour she said it would happen. Similarly, a prison officer who allegedly mistreated Clarita suffered sudden heart failure after she cursed him. Salvation eventually came when a Protestant missionary heard about the prisoner's situation. Pastor Lester Sumrall was at the time overseeing the construction of a church in Manila. When Clarita finally got to meet Pastor Sumrall, she instantly threw out some hateful words towards him. Surprisingly, she was hurling insults in English despite the fact that she could only speak Filipino. Sumrall's initial attempt to exorcise the woman seemed to have failed, and soon local newspapers were covering the sensational news about this woman's demonic possession. Determined to succeed, the pastor decided not to give up. He turned to prayer and fasting while seeking guidance, strength, and support from his congregation. Through his unwavering effort, he was able to reportedly cast out the demons inside the woman. However, in a matter of days, the evil forces supposedly returned, claiming their right on the victim's being. The preacher fought on once again, and this time, he finally helped vanquish the malevolent spirits for good. Following her deliverance, Clarita Villanueva was transferred to a welfare facility where she eventually found her freedom, both physically and spiritually. So there were 5 incarcerated people possessed by demons. Thanks so much for tuning in, and if you enjoyed this, please consider supporting us on Patreon, get access to new videos, and you can always get a 7-day free trial so you can dig into the library and binge. Got a bunch of stuff over there, new videos every single week. Stay safe, guys. I'll see you soon.